Millionaire cancelled wedding and came to girlfriend house at midnight, saying, "I wanted to say I love you." The DNA test results shattered everything Olivia Parker thought she knew. The man she'd been dating for 3 years, billionaire tech mogul James Westfield, was her biological half-brother. Olivia collapsed onto her kitchen floor, the clinical letter trembling in her hands as tears streamed down her face. How could she tell James that their entire relationship was forbidden? That the future they'd planned together, the wedding invitations already sent to 300 guests, the honeymoon villa booked in Santorini, was now impossible? If she revealed the truth, she would lose not just her fiancé but potentially destroy both their lives forever. At 32, Olivia had finally found stability after growing up in foster care, never knowing her birth parents. Her successful interior design business had brought her into James's world when he hired her to renovate his Seattle penthouse. With her warm brown skin, curly black hair often pulled into a messy bun, and preference for vintage dresses and combat boots, she'd been an unlikely match for the buttoned-up tech executive. Yet somehow, they'd fallen deeply in love. But now, the question burned in her mind: who was the parent they shared, and why had this devastating secret remained hidden for so long? 3 days before their wedding, Olivia disappeared. She left only a brief note for James saying she couldn't marry him but couldn't explain why. She retreated to her modest craftsman house on the outskirts of the city, ignoring his increasingly desperate calls and texts. Each one broke her heart further. How could she possibly tell him the horrifying truth? That night, she sat alone in her living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes from the home they'd planned to share, wearing sweatpants and an old university hoodie, her eyes red and swollen from crying. The doorbell rang at exactly midnight. When Olivia opened it, James stood there in a rumpled tuxedo, his normally perfectly styled dark hair disheveled, his blue eyes bloodshot. At 36, the self-made tech billionaire had never looked so vulnerable. "I cancelled everything," he said, his voice breaking. "The wedding, the honeymoon, all of it. I don't care about any of that. I just came to say I love you, and whatever is wrong, we'll fix it together." Olivia felt her world collapsing. How could she tell him they shared the same father, a man who had apparently lived a double life with 2 separate families? The DNA test had been a precautionary measure before their wedding, something her doctor had recommended given her unknown medical history. Now it was the grenade that would destroy everything. "You need to come in," she whispered, "but after I tell you this, nothing will ever be the same." James followed her inside, his tall frame tense with worry. Olivia's hands shook as she handed him the DNA results. "Read it," she said, unable to look at him. "The part about genetic markers and familial matches." As understanding dawned on his face, James went completely still. The color drained from his features as he looked up at her in shock. "This can't be right," he whispered. "There must be a mistake." "I ran it twice," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "We share a father, James. We're half-siblings. We can never be together." The silence between them stretched like an abyss. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows as if the universe itself was weeping for them. "I won't accept this," James finally said, his voice firm despite the tears in his eyes. "There has to be another explanation. My father died when I was 10. He was a good man. He wouldn't have." "My birth certificate lists no father," Olivia interrupted. "But the DNA doesn't lie. Somehow, some way, we share the same paternal DNA." James stood abruptly, pacing her small living room. "Then we'll find the truth. I have resources, connections. If there's been a mistake, we'll uncover it. And if it's true..." His voice broke, "then we'll face that reality together too." For the first time since receiving the devastating news, a tiny spark of hope flickered in Olivia's chest. What if there was another explanation? The next morning, James hired the country's top private investigator, a former FBI agent named Diana Reynolds. With her help, they began unraveling the mystery of their potential shared parentage. Days turned into weeks as they dug through old records, tracked down distant relatives, and followed paper trails that had gone cold decades ago. Meanwhile, they lived in an excruciating limbo, unable to be together as lovers but unwilling to be apart. They maintained separate residences but spent every day together, working side by side to uncover the truth, their love transforming into something different but no less powerful, a partnership, a friendship forged in shared pain and determination. 2 months into their investigation, Diana made a breakthrough that changed everything. "I found something you both need to see," she said, laying out documents on Olivia's dining table. "James, your father had an identical twin brother that nobody knew about. They were separated at birth during a hospital evacuation during a natural disaster. Your uncle, not your father, appears to be Olivia's biological father." The revelation hit them like a thunderbolt. If true, they weren't siblings at all, just cousins. Close relatives, yes, but not in a way that made their love forbidden. "We need absolute confirmation," James insisted, his voice tight with controlled hope. "No more surprises." A week later, more comprehensive genetic testing confirmed Diana's discovery. The DNA they shared wasn't that of siblings but of first cousins. They had different fathers who were identical twins. The relief was overwhelming, but it opened new wounds. James had never known about his uncle, and Olivia had a father she'd never met who might still be alive. "I don't care if we're cousins," James said that night, holding Olivia's hands in her kitchen. "I love you. I want to marry you. But I understand if this changes things for you." Olivia looked into his eyes, seeing the same man she'd fallen in love with years ago. "It doesn't change how I feel," she said softly. "But it changes what we do next. Before we think about our future together, I need to find my father, your uncle. I need to understand where I came from." James nodded, pulling her into his arms. "Then we'll find him together." Their search led them across the country to a small town in Maine, where Thomas Westfield, James's uncle and Olivia's father, had been living a quiet life as a bookstore owner. The meeting was emotional and complicated. Thomas had never known about Olivia, her mother had never told him she was pregnant before ending their relationship. He had lost touch with his brother decades ago after a bitter argument neither would discuss. As winter turned to spring, healing began for all of them. Thomas and James reconnected, building the family bond they should have had all along. Olivia finally understood her origins and found peace in knowing where she came from. And through it all, James and Olivia's love deepened, strengthened by the trials they had faced together. 1 year to the day after James had shown up at Olivia's door at midnight, he brought her back to that same spot. This time, he knelt on one knee, holding out a simple emerald ring, her birthstone, not a diamond. "Our love survived the impossible," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I don't want a big wedding or hundreds of guests. I just want you, Olivia. Forever." With tears in her eyes, Olivia pulled him to his feet. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. They married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony by the ocean, with Thomas walking Olivia down the aisle. Their journey had taught them that love isn't just about passion or romance, it's about standing together through life's darkest moments, fighting for each other when everything seems lost, and finding your way back to joy even when the path seems impossible. But their story didn't end with that perfect seaside wedding. Life rarely wraps up so neatly, and for James and Olivia, their journey was just beginning. 6 months into their marriage, as they were settling into their new life together, a letter arrived that would once again test the strength of their bond. It was from a woman named Eleanor Blackwood, who claimed to be Olivia's maternal grandmother, a woman Olivia had been told was long dead. "I've been searching for you for 30 years, the letter read. "Your mother, my daughter Sophia, told me you died at birth. I only recently discovered this was a lie." Olivia sat on their balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline, the letter clutched in her trembling hands as James read it over her shoulder. Why would my mother lie about something like that? She whispered. And if my grandmother has been alive all this time, what else don't I know about my past? James knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. There's only one way to find out, he said gently. We go meet her. Eleanor Blackwood lived in a stately Victorian home in San Francisco, its blue exterior and ornate white trim a stark contrast to the modern glass and steel of James and Olivia's Seattle penthouse. At 78, Eleanor was still striking, tall and elegant with silver hair swept into a chignon, her dark eyes, so like Olivia's, sharp with intelligence and decades of carefully guarded pain. You look just like her, Eleanor said when she opened the door, her voice catching. Just like my Sophia. The reunion was bittersweet. Over tea served in delicate porcelain cups that had belonged to Olivia's great-grandmother, Eleanor revealed a family history more complex and heartbreaking than either James or Olivia could have imagined. Your mother was brilliant but troubled, Eleanor explained, showing them faded photographs of a young woman with Olivia's smile and wild curls. She struggled with bipolar disorder in an era when mental health wasn't discussed openly. When she became pregnant with you at 19, she refused treatment for fear it would harm you. After you were born, she experienced severe postpartum psychosis. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she continued. She disappeared with you when you were just 3 months old. When she returned alone weeks later, she told me you had died. I was devastated. She was hospitalized shortly after, and by the time she was stable enough for me to question her story, years had passed. I never stopped looking for you, but without proof you were alive, the authorities wouldn't help. Olivia struggled to reconcile this new information with the few memories she had of her mother, a fragile woman who had surrendered her to foster care when Olivia was 4, promising to return but never did. What happened to her? She asked quietly. I was told she died when I was 6. Eleanor nodded sadly. She did. She took her own life. I believe the guilt of what she'd done, separating us, abandoning you, became too much to bear. That night in their hotel room, Olivia broke down in James's arms. I've spent my whole life feeling unwanted, she sobbed. But my grandmother was searching for me all along. We could have had a family, a history. James held her tightly, his own eyes wet with tears. You have a family now, he whispered into her hair. And we'll make our own history, day by day. The discovery of Eleanor brought unexpected healing, but also new complications. Eleanor was wealthy, the widow of a banking executive who had left her a considerable fortune. When she updated her will to include Olivia as her sole heir, distant relatives emerged from the woodwork, challenging Olivia's identity and claiming Eleanor was being manipulated. I don't want her money, Olivia told James as they faced yet another legal deposition. I just want to know her, to have these few years with her before it's too late. James, who had built his tech empire from nothing, understood better than most how wealth could complicate relationships. The money isn't important, he agreed. But your right to know your family is. We'll fight for that. And fight they did, through 18 months of legal battles that tested their patience and resolve. Throughout it all, Eleanor and Olivia grew closer, filling in the gaps of lost time. Eleanor shared family recipes, stories of Olivia's ancestors, and the cultural heritage that had been denied to her in foster care. In turn, Olivia brought Eleanor into her life with James, creating new traditions that bridged past and present. When the legal challenges were finally dismissed and Eleanor's health began to fail, she made a request that surprised them both. I want to see where Thomas lives, she told them one evening. I want to meet the father of my granddaughter before it's too late for all of us. The journey to Maine was difficult for Eleanor, now weakened by heart problems, but she insisted. I've lost too much time already, she said firmly. I won't waste what's left. Thomas was waiting for them on the porch of his bookstore, nervous but determined. At 68, he was still handsome, with the same blue eyes as James but with deeper laugh lines and a more relaxed demeanor. The meeting between these two people, connected only through Olivia but each representing a piece of her fragmented past, was tentative at first, then surprisingly warm. "Thank you for giving the world Olivia," Eleanor told Thomas as they sat in his cozy apartment above the bookstore, surrounded by thousands of books. "Even if you didn't know." Thomas smiled sadly. "I wish I had known. I would have moved heaven and earth to be in her life." "We can't change the past," Eleanor replied, reaching out to take his hand. "But perhaps we can make the most of the present." What none of them expected was the gentle friendship that blossomed between Thomas and Eleanor, two people who had never met but who shared a profound connection through their love for Olivia. As Eleanor's health continued to decline, she made the decision to move to Maine, taking an apartment near Thomas's bookstore where she could spend her remaining time close to both her newfound family members. For Olivia and James, watching this unexpected relationship unfold was both beautiful and bittersweet. "They're making up for lost time," James observed one evening as they watched Thomas and Eleanor laughing together over dinner. "Just like we all are." 3 years into their marriage, as they had finally found a rhythm with their unconventional extended family, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. The news brought both joy and anxiety, joy at the new life they had created together, anxiety about what genetic surprises might still lurk in their complicated family tree. "What if there's something else we don't know?" Olivia worried as they waited for results from comprehensive genetic testing. "What if there's some other secret that could hurt our baby?" James held her close, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he promised. "That's what we do now. That's who we are." The tests came back clear, their baby was healthy, with no concerning genetic markers. When their daughter was born 7 months later, they named her Hope Eleanor Thomas Westfield, a name that honored their past while embracing their future. On Hope's first birthday, they gathered in the garden of the home they had built halfway between Seattle and Maine, a place where their entire unconventional family could come together. Eleanor, now in a wheelchair but still elegant and sharp-witted, held her great-granddaughter on her lap. Thomas sat beside them, occasionally reaching over to tickle Hope's chubby cheeks. "Look at what we've created," Olivia said to James as they watched this scene unfold. From secrets and separation came all of this love. James wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "That midnight when I came to your door, I was so afraid I'd lost you forever. I never imagined we'd end up here." "Life never takes the path we expect," Olivia replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "But sometimes it takes us exactly where we need to be." As the sun set over their gathered family, casting golden light across 3 generations of healing and hope, Olivia and James knew that their story, with all its unexpected twists and turns, had become something more powerful than either of them could have imagined. It had become a testament to the resilience of love, the healing power of truth, and the beautiful possibility of second chances. So where are you watching this story from? Drop your country in the comments below. If this tale of love overcoming impossible odds touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the extraordinary power of human connection. Remember, sometimes what seems like the end is just the beginning of something even more beautiful than we could have imagined.